What's going on? Danny Mattei back again with Caffeine and Cash Practices, drinking a little bit of coffee and talking about how you can start, grow, scale, and effectively run your cash-based practice. So if you don't know who I am, welcome to the channel. I'm Danny Mattei from PT Biz. This is the company that we have, this consulting company that helps cash practices just like the ones that you own all over the country and world. We've worked with a little over 1,000 practice owners at this point. So everything I'm going to share with you is based off of reps and experience and not theory. And today we're talking about how do you hire people and the mistakes that we see when people go through the hiring process. So when we look at a service-based business, there are two things you need in order to scale that are constraints and bottlenecks that we see trip people up all the time. Number one is they don't have the space, meaning they have a hard time finding a space in which they can grow into, which is a completely different episode we'll get into at a different time. The other one is finding the people, and not just the people, but the right people. And for those of you that have ever worked with a team, which I'm sure some of you, listening to this and watching this, you've been in clinics that are great teams, and you've been in clinics where it's really bad. And a lot of that has to do with culture and the people that are there and how they work together. So when we look at hiring is something that many of you have really not had to do a lot of. And if you have, you're also doing it in the context of somebody else's systems. So let's say you're a clinic director for some other bigger group. You're hiring based on their systems, their fits they're looking for, their structure. And maybe it's not exactly who you would want, but it's who that company wants. Now, when you go off and you start on your own thing, you're hiring for your own company, your own culture, everything is slightly different, and you can make those decisions and be very nimble about who you decide to hire. And what we see, there's three big mistakes that people typically make that lead to turnover with staff, and I have done these myself. I've worked with plenty of people that have made these same mistakes, and if you can avoid these, you're going to help yourself not have turnover. And turnover, especially early on in a clinical setting, is one of the biggest things that will slow you down. If you are one person functioning as a clinician in the clinic, let's say you have, maybe an administrative person and you bring another clinician on and that clinician leaves, or you have to fire that clinician, you've now lost 50% of your workforce. You have to keep that in mind. Like, it's such a large amount of the capacity that your business can produce when you have to let a clinical person go or they decide to leave. So making the right hire is so important so you don't have that turnover, so you can scale to your second, third, fourth, however many clinicians after that. So the number one mistake that I see is that people hire people that are just like them. Over and over and over again, this is the number one thing that I see that leads to problems. They interview people and they say, man, I like this guy. I like what he's saying. I like the way that he talks. I like his background. Well, guess what? That's because it's basically you. It's just like you. And that might be a good person to hire, but it depends on the role, because you have to think about this for a second. You are probably an entrepreneurial person that is fine with like quick changes and getting started fast, but maybe not so great at like following through and seeing things through and being organized and developing systems and all of that. Do you think that you would be a good employee? Have you been a good employee in the past? Let's put it that way as well. Or are you maybe kind of a frustrating person for someone to employ? I know for me, I'm a pretty frustrating person for people to employ because I see things, I want to make fast changes. I'm not the best at like following through on, whatever organized systems that I need to be following within somebody's business. I wouldn't hire me, right? But the mistake that I see a lot of clinicians make, especially younger clinicians, is they hire somebody just like them because that's who they want to hang out with and be around in the clinic. And I totally get it. But what you have to look at is fit. And oftentimes the clinician that you need is somebody that offsets your own skill set and is going to be that steady person that's going to show up, and they're actually going to, be a great fulfiller of services and not necessarily be this quick starter like you are. So think about that next time you're looking at the hiring process. Is this person too similar to me? Because you want somebody that's going to offset your strengths, offsets your weaknesses with their strengths and vice versa, versus somebody that's just solely like you. Okay, number two. Huge mistake that we see, and even more so now that things have gotten even more expensive over the last couple of years, is that people tie too much compensation to bonuses and not enough to base salary with clinicians. And what I mean by that is Usually when someone is setting up a compensation structure for cash-based clinics, there's going to be some element of base salary and some element of bonus compensation based off of volume seen. This is pretty common as well in in-network practices. But let's say your bonus compensation structure looks like this. Let's say your base salary is $4,000 a month, and the most that you can make off of a monthly bonus is, let's say, another $4,000 a month, right? So let's say that person can make up to $8,000 total, but $4,000 guaranteed, $4,000 is based off of how much volume that person sees. That sounds like a great deal for the business owner, but for that clinician, it's a very, it's somewhat sketchy because 50% of their compensation is coming from variability within the day-to-day and the monthly volume that they're going to see. That is going to be a position where somebody is going to be okay with that, which means they're okay with volatility, they're okay with risk, which also means they're probably okay with leaving and just going and doing their own thing after a year. Keep that in mind. The way in which you compensate people dictates how long they're going to stick around in your organization. Now, if you were to take that same comp structure and you said, okay, well, let's switch it. The base, let's say, is 6,000. The bonus top line is 2, gets into the same place, but they have far more guaranteed money of their base compensation and far less tied to the actual bonuses from seeing patients. That puts them in a safer place. And paycheck consistency, or the ability for them to make a set amount of money and they feel comfortable and confident that they can do that, is one of the strongest reasons why somebody's either going to stay or leave. So make sure that when you're setting up comp structures, you're not doing it in a way that's driving them to really be so entrepreneurial that they become an entrepreneur and they leave, because you basically are putting all the risk on them. It's a huge mistake I see over and over again, where the clinician, the business owner, puts too much risk on the clinician and basically turns them into an entrepreneur because they're taking all the risk anyway. They might as well have more compensation from that. You want to de-risk that for them and make their base salary higher, their compensation structure lower, so that they get comfortable for the paycheck. They don't have to work, solely based off of volume, and they feel more comfortable being in your environment and they want to be there for a longer period of time. Last thing that I see is a huge mistake is when you bring on a staff clinician, another fulfiller of services, is that you do not have administrative infrastructure in place. Now, what I mean by that is it could be, and most likely, having an actual administrative person in place to be able to fulfill on all the back end administrative tasks, reaching out to people, following up with leads, scheduling people, making sure that all the administrative tasks, super bills, and everything that you need is getting taken care of for you to be able to focus on the clinical environment and get great outcomes for that patient. Now, when you bring on another staff clinician, if you do not have tight administrative systems, both technologically and with people, then you become the admin for that person. Meaning, now you're seeing patients and now you just become the office manager for this other person. Otherwise, they're going to have to do all these administrative tasks, which really makes them less efficient at seeing patients. And that's not really what they should be doing anyway. You need them focusing on delivering world-class clinical outcomes and experiences, and they can't do that if they're focused on putting super bills together and actual following up with leads and all these things that they should have taken off their plate so they can focus on being great clinicians. So don't skip the administrative structure side of the business. It's hard sometimes because we see that and you might think, well, this isn't a revenue producing employee. They're costing me, this office manager, this admin is costing me $4,000 a month. Well, yes, that's true, but how much time are they saving you doing tasks that you shouldn't be doing anyway? And how much does that leverage to other people? You can have one solid admin for 3 to 4 clinicians, and you scale into that across multiple clinicians as you bring them on. You need that centerpiece for the business that's running operations. If you don't have it, you're going to become that person. You're going to get burnt out, frustrated, or that other clinician is going to have to do all these administrative tasks. They're going to get burned out and frustrated because they didn't go to school to be an office manager. They want to be a clinician, and then they're going to leave and you're going to have turnover, which is what we want to avoid. So in summary, when you go to hire, 3 big things. Number 1, don't just hire somebody that's just like you. I know, I get it. You think they're awesome because they're like you, and that's cool. And they might be the right person to hire, but that shouldn't be the main reason why you're hiring that person. You need to hire somebody that's going to make the team stronger. And that doesn't always mean that they have the same skill set as you. Oftentimes they do not. Number two, don't make their compensation structure so sketchy that they feel like they're taking all the risk, because if they feel like they're taking all the risk, they're going to wonder why they're not doing it for themselves. They're going to leave, they're going to go do their own thing, and you're going to essentially force them into the path of entrepreneurship because of not giving them security in their paycheck, in their structure, in their salary. And you can have a part of that being compensation, but make it lower than what you probably think it should be, because you need to take the risk, not them. You're the entrepreneur, you're the business owner. Last thing, not having administrative infrastructure. So not having somebody to manage the business, not having somebody to manage the operations side before you go bring somebody else on. This is either going to force you to be the office manager, or it's going to force them to do it. Either way, they're going to get frustrated, they're going to leave, and they're going to go find something else to do. So guys, hope this helps. Hiring mistakes, one of the biggest problems we see. Turnover is something that slows your business down, and it's just so deflating when it happens. I've been there myself. You know, you end up having to take on the extra patients. You end up having to work really hard to find somebody else while you're super time poor. If you can avoid these mistakes, you're going to have much kind of more steady growth up and to the right, and you're not going to have these big ups and downs in the business that hopefully you can avoid by following these hiring mistakes that we hope you don't do. So as always, guys, if you like this, let us know in the comments. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you next week.